Welcome to Curious Goldfish, a podcast community where music and curiosity come together through interesting conversations with the music makers of our world. I'm your host, Jason English. You can find Curious Goldfish in all the major podcast and social media platforms, and of course, we have all of our content on our website, curiousgoldfish.com. Hey, Graham. Happy Monday.
Yes.
I appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Always nice to have something, constructive to do on a Monday relating to music. It's usually the day like we get home on, Sunday night or Monday morning, and it's all sort of a lot of catch up of stuff around the house. So it's nice to jump into a little bit of music on a Monday too.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's an honor to meet you and to talk with you, and congrats on your latest solo album. How did we do it? So we're definitely going to get into that. But I think you were telling me before we started recording about, the show in Asheville that you guys do as part of Steep Canyon Rangers that you guys have been doing for a number of years, I guess. How is that area doing, since the awful weather events of last year? And it sounds like you had a great turnout. So hopefully they're getting kind of back on their feet.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing was strange because it was so spotty. Like if you were around the water or places where the water came up, you got totally destroyed. And then if you were where I live, you don't see it right now. We didn't have water for about 50 days or something like that. Here in my neighborhood and across town. But Asheville's doing good. A big part of this show we did was put on by that downtown association, some bunch of sponsors, but a big part of what it is like just getting people back into downtown Asheville. The narrative was for the immediate narrative around the hurricane Helene. Folks don't remember, this was September 27th, I think, something like that. And it was true. It was totally debilitating and just tons of destruction up here. And then the other side of the coin was like, well, hold on, like we still, after everybody got water back a month and a half later, so it was like a lot of this town is perfectly good and operational and like actually is struggling right now because we need people, we need visitors, we need tourists. We have so many restaurants, we have so many, so much stuff around tourism in Asheville. Asheville's always been a tourism town, dating back 200 years. So losing that has been really hard for a lot of businesses and stuff like that, especially downtown where people don't live. So some of these music events that have happened downtown, like Billy Strings came for 6 nights and sold out the Civic Center. And like the hotels were full, the restaurants were full. It was like the greatest thing for downtown. And so this was sort of a similar effort along that. We had about 8,000 or 9,000 people down in Pack Square for a free show and sponsored by Oscar Blues and then the Subaru dealership here in town and just locals stepping up. But, so it was like kind of twofold. It was, let's get visitors, let them know that downtown's back open for business and is hopping. And also like, let's just like get the locals together again, and just kind of remember like why we're here, which is, to have a good time and make art. It's a special place, and maybe it's got more special just through the hurricane. There was so much that just counted on people looking out for each other and sort of bonding together, and everybody kind of offering what they could lend to the situation. So that's kind of what we could do, was have a big free show downtown, and it was a massive success.
That's awesome. That's really good. So is the city, not to get into public infrastructure decisions or anything like that and policies, but is the city as it rebuilds, are they changing anything as it relates to development and homes?
That's a good question.
And businesses, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine some of the stuff coming back like along the rivers like it was, especially out towards like Swannanoa, Black Mountain. They got hit really hard. The River Arts District in Asheville, I mean, it got flooded. It got hit really, really hard. But I mean, I think most of this stuff is coming back, and a lot of it's already opened back up. several of the breweries. And I think we were out riding bikes yesterday, and we were near Old Fort, and I think the Hillman Breweries opened up back there, which was kind of like a big sort of meeting place in that town. So I think people were determined. I mean, in one sense, people didn't have an option. It's like if this is where I own my land. This is where my and even if the building's gone, like this is where my place is. So I'm gonna build back here, and we're gonna do it again. And I think probably maybe there's some ways to mitigate the damage that came down, but I think there's also sort of just some of the hope that like, hey, this happens. This is such an anomaly here that like,
Right.
this isn't going to scare us off. We're more hard-headed than that in a lot of ways. So I think where people they're just going right back at it.
Well, good. So you mentioned Oscar Blues, which is great. I lived in Boulder, Colorado for 20 years, and I think they were founded out there. And Boulder and Asheville have a, very symbiotic relationship and have a brother-sister community because I think they're very similar in terms of DNA, personality, terrain, all those things. And I know you and Woody performed a few years ago for E-Town,
Yep.
right? And did an interview with Nick Forrester and those guys. And I went to a number of E-Town shows when I lived there. That their whole thing is incredible. And what I want to get to on that is obviously Nick was part of I think it was called Hot Rise,
Yep.
the Bluegrass band. So when you think about you as a solo artist, and we're going to talk about your latest album, but then obviously as part of Steep Canyon, I think bluegrass is very generational, right? Like you draw on sort of the father figures of Doc Watson and others, Hot Rise, Tim O'Brien, you guys now, the list goes on and on. I guess, what do you think your legacy as part of Steep Canyon will be for like the next generation? Because I'm sure you've picked things here and there from all those artists through the years. What are you hoping that the next generation will pick from you guys?
Well, I mean, hopefully just like the fact that it's really important to have your own voice, that it's really vital to speak with your own words and like kind of forge your own identity. I mean, the tradition's so strong that it's really easy to just stay. I mean, to just play the songs from 60 years ago, and people love them. And you can do it, and they're great songs and they work for a reason. But for us, it was always about kind of grafting our own experience and our own views, and even on one hand musically, but also just as much kind of lyrically, I think, just to tell our own story and sing songs that came from the heart for us, and were actually like the songs about things that we cared about. So I hope that's something that gets passed on. I mean, I was at a festival 2 weekends ago, and one of the performers came up to me, and she's Bronwyn. Maybe she's won Fiddle Player of the Year with the IBMA. I don't know, but she's running her own band now, and she's fantastic. And she came up and she said, "I grew up like listening to Steve Canyon Rangers." Like, oh my gosh, wow, okay, yeah, cool. It's amazing. So yeah, to be in that position, because the very first CD I had of bluegrass you mentioned Hot Rise, and I had a Latin teacher in high school, and he turned me on to a guitar player named Norman Blake, who's from up. He's North Georgia, and I mean he plays on Johnny Cash and Dylan records and all this, but he was like one of the real. Along with John Hartford, he was kind of one of Hartford's right-hand guys. Anyways, I was trying to find a CD by him, and only the CD that there was this Telluride 1975 or 76 Telluride Festival. So I picked up the CD and had a little Norman Blake, and it had Hot Rise, and it had Newgrass Revival, and it had Doc Watson, and it had, a whole list like that. And that was the door, between that and Jerry Garcia holding in the way. That was the door getting kicked down for me. So I sort of came into bluegrass listening to people who had already taken Bill Monroe and Flatt and Scruggs and like put their own stamp on it. Like that was already seemed like the right thing to do. So it never felt like a jump saying, okay, well, we're going to put our own stamp on it. We're going to do our own thing. That never seemed like something terribly out of the ordinary.
Okay. Well, I think, one thing I wanted to ask you too is I'm not an expert, right, on really anything, especially bluegrass, but it feels like the time you just mentioned in the early to mid 70s, kind of into the late 90s, and again, the hardcore bluegrass fans would probably argue this, but I feel like it was sort of in the shadows a little bit, it's kind of played, no pun intended, second fiddle to, some of the 80s country and, some of that stuff. But I think if I look at to you guys and then like String Cheese and others, it feels like you guys were part of that kind of resurgence, a little bit, and kind of making bluegrass cool again. I guess, do you guys know as that was happening that you were sort of maybe part of a movement like that, or not really?
Yeah, I mean, you could feel it a little bit. You could feel it. I mean, we started off, this is be like the early 2000s, we started off like really hammering those like traditional bluegrass festivals. Like that's what we wanted to be. We wanted to be the band who could go on to these traditional festivals and like, go out there and just absolutely kill it. So we like formulated a lot of the band on like, what does it take to go out there and follow like these bands who were, or play before them or whatever, just to stand shoulder to shoulder with some of these bands that were really our heroes. And we kind of built the band around that a lot in that point. But then, yeah, I mean, it was right around, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? People say it, but it was a big deal.
Big deal.
And so, yeah, you started feeling that. You definitely started noticing it especially when you went outside these traditional festivals, that kind of the general public was more in tune, and it didn't hurt that bands were like sort of crossing into the mainstream a little bit. Like Fish would play a bluegrass song, in the middle of their show, or like they'd have Del McCoury up to sing with them, or Del McCoury and Steve Earle made a record together, or Dolly Parton made a bluegrass record. I mean, all these things, the Ricky Skaggs came back into bluegrass around that. Like all these things sort of happened in the early 2000s that I think, sort of compounded on each other, and we were there, and it didn't seem strange. But then all of a sudden you look around and you're like, oh, hold on, there's bluegrass bands now like playing big shows, which was not the deal. I mean, and when we were starting off, around Chapel Hill, North Carolina, you go to these, you see the best bluegrass band in the world playing these little community centers or churches or, little honky tonks and stuff like that. Then all of a sudden you look up and now they're playing Red Rocks. It's a big difference.
Yeah. I mentioned Boulder earlier. Like one of the best shows I saw when I was living out there was at a place called Chautauqua, up on the the foothills, right? And about 35 minutes from Red Rocks, but in the foothills near the Flatirons, there in Boulder, and it was Earl Scruggs and Ralph Stanley. And I mean, can you imagine? Wow. Can you imagine? I mean, this was probably 12, 15 years ago, right? Obviously they were at towards the end of their life, but. I mean, can you imagine if that was a bill today? The draw that would, because it's like even then it was big, but like now, thanks to you all and thanks to Billy Strings and others, like their legend continues to grow. So I'll never forget that. It was like going to church, obviously.
Wow, yeah, that's a banjo player. Yeah, it's a banjo player's dream right there.
Yeah. So anyway, well, I do have just a few more Steep Canyon questions for you. Then I obviously want to talk to you about the album. But I know the band's gone through a little bit of a transition with members and lead vocalists, things like that, in the last couple of years, more so than the previous 15 or so. And I think we were talking a little bit before, but this show was inspired by Ted Lasso, right? And obviously he was a fictional soccer coach or football coach. But in terms of, coaches in sports have to manage transition. They have to manage free agency. They have to manage, someone graduating, right? But as a band, you look at whoever it is, Rolling Stones, U2, Dave Matthews, whoever, right? There are bands that stick around, Pearl Jam stick around for decades without a whole lot of transition. So I know Woody wanted to take a step back and spend more time at home. I guess, how was that experience? And did you have to kind of manage that a little bit of like a coach would?
Yeah, I mean, I think we learned a lot, in there. At first, it was a little bit terrifying. I mean, Woody, besides playing guitar and singing, he did like most of the business, stuff for the band. He was like the guy with the Rolodex, and like kind of the way we broke it up was like I wrote the songs and he did the business, and like that worked out great. So it was scary, in that way, not really knowing, and it was like right on the heels of the COVID lockdown, so there was already, so many question marks and nothing was normal at that point already. But, I think the first thing we did was just sort of look around and try to take stock of like everybody who was left and be like, hey, now's the time. If anybody else sort of wants out, like this is the time, because it's going to take some real work and some real rethinking to make this happen. You mentioned Ted Lasso. I mean, like PSG just won the Champions League 2 years after Mbappe, Neymar, and Messi left. So, and we were lucky as a band for 20 years to really not have a lot of changeover, but change isn't the worst thing to shake stuff up after a little while. And I know it was jarring for some of the old Steep Canyon fans, but I feel like it's changed everything in a nice way that we've been able to adapt to, and it all feels great these days.
Are you happy? Are you happy where you're at today, looking back to when all that was going down? Like, if you would have known then how you are today, would you be satisfied? With sort of that evolution?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think the band was always in evolution. From a traditional bluegrass band to sort of a whatever we are, whatever we are. So I mean, I think it was just a little more of that, and it freed up some space for other people to take a step forward. I think that's a good thing. People were ready, like our bass player Barrett. He's always been a great singer, but he always just sort of stayed in the background, and now and now we're asking a lot more of him. And myself included, I always sang a little bit here and there, but I've, had to step up and take shoulder a little bit more of that. So I think it's a good thing to demand something new and give people sort of roles that maybe they were ready for, but they didn't know they were ready for. So I think there's been a lot of that in the band. And then Aaron, who we brought in, is a great songwriter. So it's been nice. I think when our bass player Charles left, I don't know, 4 or 5 years before Woody, it kind of left me as the primary or as the only songwriter. And we made a good record or two like that, but I feel like it's important to have another songwriting voice in there. Aaron's like a very different type of writer than I am. Obviously a very different kind of singer. So that's been a good thing for the band.
No, that's great. I know you've been asked a million times about like the Steve Martin experience. I am curious though, like what was the one thing you took away from that run where you guys were, doing so many things, touring, being on late night shows together? I mean, if you look back at that, what was the one thing that you learned as part of that process?
I think two things, which maybe I guess go together, is like Steve's insane amount of preparation. Like he works hard, and he's always like pushing something new or coming up with something. Every time we, there was for a long time there. Every time we see him, he'd be like, he'd walk in a room with his banjo. Say if like we got to the theater, and we're kind of just getting settled in. He'd walk in with his banjo, and he'd hardly even say hi, and he'd be like, I got a new song, let's play it right now. And like just so focused on that part of it. And then I think the other part of it was like he was never afraid to try something. If he thought it could work, he would go for it. And I feel like he is a very good judge of if something was working or not. He could work on it, see that it wasn't working, and throw it away and move to the next thing. So maybe that
That's
sort of
awesome.
fail fast mentality.
Yeah.
He sort of
Were you surprised at his musicianship?
yeah, yeah, a little bit
Yeah.
surprised at his musicianship, just how consistent he could be with it. I mean, and I think that just goes back to like just the hardworking part of it. It's it's not easy to be that proficient, and it doesn't happen by accident. It takes some real intentionality, and he can do those things. Like he can learn how to. He's he will tell you like, so he was gonna record a little bit of music with us. This was just last weekend, and we were going back and forth because he was going to record it where he was in New York, and we were in Indiana at the time, and we were going back and forth. And he said, he was like, "Well, what about this section here?" He's like, "What do you kind of want to play?" And I kind of tried to describe something to him, and it wasn't making sense. And then I was like, "Well, just do what comes naturally," And he wrote back, he said, "Nothing comes natural." And he said similar things before, which is like it's all about like just like that focus sort of preparation that he's able to do. So like say like he has 6 months in a movie and he needs to learn how to tap dance like Gregory Hines, like he'll do it, and he's able to teach himself and focus like that. Or like he needs to learn how to do a lasso, for Three Amigos or something like that. Yeah, I mean, like give him the time and he'll do it. It's just amazing just how how dedicated a learner he is.
It's actually like so cool and so refreshing to just think about, all the people that are in Nashville as an example that have loads and loads of talent, right? Either on an instrument or vocally or whatever. And, I think a lot of them are probably under the misconception that, that will carry the day, and getting viral with a clip will carry the day. For him, that nothing comes natural, and going back to practice and preparedness. I mean, that I think that's how people separate themselves,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say I take offense to it, but when people just say, "Oh, I wish I had talent," I wish I had some natural ability. It's like, okay, yeah, I mean, that'll get you so far. But I mean, what they say about 10,000 hours, I mean, it takes more like 20.
Right.
It seems like it. Or like with me, like I can't. Those hours that I have in the bank doing it, like they're good, but I still have to like keep it up. I can't just instantly recall like being dexterous on an instrument or songwriting for that matter either. Like if you don't keep doing it and keep doing it, you lose it. So
Yeah.
um, there's so many talented people who, I mean, here I am saying it again, but there's so many people who seemingly do things more effortlessly than I do, that I've seen
Sure.
just for one reason or another not be able to sort of get over the hump as far as being a professional. And a lot of that was just good fortune for us of just having a group of guys who functioned really well together, and just sort of the pieces fit together really early on, and we managed to stay consistent and work hard.
Oh, that's great. So I didn't realize you guys were still collaborating with Steve. Is it kind of a little bit more sporadic now than it
Yeah,
was probably a few years ago?
yeah. I mean, it's changed. Now it's always been. We did a couple records, but he's always done other records. Musically, he did a couple with Edie, and now he's been making some with like Allison Brown and stuff. Some great stuff up there. But we're still the band for the live shows for the most part. So
Nice.
we've got, I don't know, 15 shows coming up in the fall, but the live shows are different. They're now Steve and Martin Short, and
Okay.
it's a comedy show. So
Okay.
like in Atlanta, like we'll come to the Fox and maybe do the Fox for a couple nights, and the band comes out and we'll play maybe 6 songs over the course of the night, maybe 7 songs, something like that. So the nature of the show has changed, and so the nature of the collaboration has changed. But yeah, I mean, we're still in touch. Like I said, Barrett and I, the bass player, we were walking around the sidewalks in Muncie, Indiana, like FaceTiming Steve a couple days ago while he's playing banjo. Like, what about this? We're like, yeah, yeah.
Well, you mentioned Martin. One of my favorite songs that's an instrumental is the Great Remember, which I think Steve put together in honor of Martin's wife
Yep.
that passed. Right.
Yep.
So I guess I should have researched the song credits on that. But were you involved in that composing of that and playing that?
Well, so we recorded that one, with Steve on maybe Rare Bird Alert we did together. But I remember, going to a hotel room with Steve, and I had my banjo, and he was like playing that melody. And so, kind of what he would leave to us as the band was like, here's the melody, like, let's build the chord structure around it. So, like, my role as a banjo player a lot of times was like banjo interpreter, like, okay, well, here he's playing, this looks like a C to F thing, and then as that goes, it's like, okay, you can add some flavors. Maybe it's a C to a D minor, if you want to change the flavor of it a little bit. But, so that's kind of the role. I was sort of an intermediary translator from banjo to sort of a lot of the arrangement with the band. So, yeah, I mean, seeing some of these songs from like their various early moments, and sometimes you're like, oh, that thing's perfect. It's a hit. And sometimes you're like, I don't know if that's going to work. And like, Steve can surprise you the way he can pull stuff off,
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, from a Steep Canyon perspective, do you guys have a new like an upcoming album that you're working on at all?
Yeah, sure do. We're mixing one right now. So.
Oh, you are? Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Is that like a 2025 release, do you think? Or
probably have some singles out later this year.
Okay.
Start putting some singles out, maybe hopefully by the end of the summer.
Okay. Well, good. Well, I definitely want to talk a little bit about your solo album that came out in April. How did we do it? I first have to ask though, as a Tar Heel, what is going on in Chapel Hill right now with the football program? Do you have any insight that you can share about what's going on?
This is like a little bit of an unpopular. This is a hard thing to say, but as long as they don't mess up the basketball team too much, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, I don't know. I mean, sure, okay, we can be a football school. Let's get that money, let's get all that money that the SEC teams have so we can maybe boost our basketball program back up. But I don't know. It's it's just this step down, we stepped on that slippery slope, we sure did. And
I mean, it's wild to think that, Bill Belichick's going to be in Chapel Hill. That's enough. But then when you add all this other drama, with all that, I mean, I bet all the boosters are going like, okay, like we thought this was like going to be something, but I'm sure no one expected all that.
This is what you signed up for, you go and hire a professional, whatever. This is what we signed up for. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, yeah, great. Let's go win the football national championship. Sounds like a great idea.
All right, well, good. Yeah, had to ask you about that. So, so the new album, I guess, what's been the feedback so far, and what surprised you from the times that you played songs live, and just the feedback from your fans?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because like I didn't. It's just had a different effect on people, I think, than I thought it would, or I thought it might. I knew it was kind of a more sort of easygoing sort of thing. Maybe probably less just general intensity, I think, than the Steep Canyon Rangers like generally bring to recordings. But people, they really respond to that. I had somebody call me after I played an Albert Release show, and they're like, Bluegrass is usually like just kind of like running on a treadmill or like getting hit, with like a baseball bat, and like that's a lot of what I love about Bluegrass is that like it's really hard hitting and it's fast and all that stuff. And they're like, but your show was just like laying in swinging in a hammock, kind of being fanned, by somebody at the whole time. So that kind of sentiment has sort of been the general feedback from the record. Just that I wouldn't say it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it kind of doesn't try to be more than what it is. They're simple songs with like hopefully honest sentiments that people can relate to, and and hopefully that's enough.
Well, I mean, the themes are great. I mean, it may be sort of unintentionally serious and deep. It may be, you may have intended to have a casual sort of approach, but I know one of the themes is enduring love and partnership, right? Um, is that a sort of a intentional, unintentional tribute, to your relationship for so many years? Is it
Yeah.
based on a familial relationship? Like what sort of inspired that theme?
Yeah, I mean, very much, just like personal life. And maybe that's what's something that separates it from the Steep Canyon recordings.
Yeah.
A lot of the songs on Steep Canyon records are very personal to me as well. But maybe just me presenting them, kind of out of that context just brings a little bit more of that. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of kind of a love letter to my wife and my family. It just had all these songs left over for the most part. There's a couple that I think I wrote for the record, but for the most part, there's songs that have sort of been around the Steep Canyon basket for maybe an album cycle, maybe two, and just never quite found their place. But I wasn't ready to give up on them. And yeah, it's been fun. I mean, playing them live has been really fun because I got some great players, just the Asheville guys who are fantastic, and everything is just like a little looser, so it just gives everybody a little chance to stretch out a little bit more. The Rangers take a lot of pride in is just like being airtight, and we've actually we've like worked to like loosen up the airtightness of our show a little bit, just to give some more wiggle room. But when people don't really know the songs quite as well, there's a lot of wiggle room, and so doing these live shows has been fun. I guess the owner of one of the clubs we played said you just like feel the vibe of the music kind of reflected in the crowd, and that's the best. That's the best, when just like people are just smiling at each other, for no reason, and they're just feeling good in their place. And like, but that show we did in Asheville with the Rangers last week was the same thing. It was like everybody's just like, we're just a part of this scene. This is something so much bigger. And like, what happens when you get a bunch of people of with the best intentions together? It's bigger than any of that. And the flip side is we played a show a couple weeks before that could have been very similar, but like, I don't know. It was like all the police and sheriffs from the whole county had like parked all their vehicles through the entrance, and it felt like a military parade, and the vibe was totally off, and like the whole show was like a little bit, nobody had any fun, So, if you can set the scene and let everybody be comfortable, then people are gonna really sort of involve themselves with the music on their own terms, and that's the best.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you about the songwriting, whether if you sit down to write a song and say, okay, I'm going to write a song for the Rangers, or hey, this is going to be a Graham Sharp song, or you just write the song and then it sort of let the process play out. And it sounds like that's been the mode. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's definitely fair. A lot of times with the Rangers, I'll have a song and I'll like really push it on the Rangers. Like, I think this is a good song for the band, and like I play it once for them and they forget it, and I play it once for somebody else, and it kind of sits by the wayside, and I keep pushing. And some songs I'm like, okay, well, I'll play this. We'll go through this a couple times, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and that's fine. So no, I think they're all written with the Rangers in mind. But and I really would never know what's going to take with the Rangers. What's gonna strike that chord or get everybody's attention. But like half the songs on this record, like various people in the Rangers have sort of sang or know how it goes or have watched it evolve. In that process. So they're all sort of bunched in the air together. The best thing about the band and new songs is like getting people's first impressions of it, and I tend to really bank a lot on people's first impressions. So if I'll play a song for somebody and maybe they won't say anything, but then 2 weeks they'll come back and be like, man, that song's been in my head. Like, they're like, okay, that's good. We're gonna roll with that. When you have a lot of songs to choose from for the last Rangers record that we're finishing now, I mean, there was probably 30 songs to choose from. So you got to find some way to separate the wheat from the chaff there.
Yeah, that's incredible. So you mentioned a love letter to your wife. I guess, how long have you all been together? Did you all meet at Chapel Hill?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we met maybe like the same month that the band met, which would have been like, somewhere in like, I don't know if it was 1998 or 1999, somewhere in there. But I mean, it was like, there was like, she was living in a house where one of our friends lived who had like bluegrass. We'd go over there and play bluegrass on his porch and in his kitchen, like all the time. And like, so my wife and I, we've been married for, I think, going on 20 years now.
Yeah, that's awesome. What do you owe the endurance and the longevity? What's your secret? If someone was to ask you, and along the way, obviously everybody faces challenges. Relationships are hard, right? What have you all faced, and how have you all kind of been resilient to last 20 years and hopefully another 20?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think in terms of like with the band and what the band has to do to stay together and working is a little bit similar, which is like just like a constant sort of rebalancing. Like, you can't just not always expecting someone to be able to do the exact same thing or respond or do certain things that they did 5 years ago, like let's just reassess and figure out where we are and how we can make it work. But she's been I don't know how like that song, How We Did It, off the records, like that's the thing. I mean, when our kids were little, and man, we were like traveling in a van and we were gone all the time, and when I was home I wasn't worth a shit because I was like worn out from the road, and our kids were little and she was working full time. Like, that was stressful. That was really hard times. But yeah, I don't know how she stuck with it, because like we were out. We're, as far as bands go, we're pretty tame, and we were well behaved as far as a lot of bands go. Traveling, you hear stories about bands on the road and whatnot.
Yeah.
And we had fun, but we were always like, our families were always our priority. Like, so that, like, I think just the knowledge of that and like building that history up over a number of years, be like, yeah, the band's important, but the family's a priority. I think having that in the bank from 5 years and then 10 years and 15 years has gone a long way.
You mentioned before we were recording, you had a son that just graduated high school. Is that your youngest?
He's my oldest. Yeah.
He's your oldest. You've got more coming. All right.
Well, I've got, my daughter's a junior in high school, so I mean, they're right on. She's right on his heels. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah,
how
we got
do you
another.
And your wife view sort of empty nest period of your life? Are you looking forward to it, or are you dreading it? I'm sure she's dreading it, as a mother usually does.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think so, but I mean, also, I mean, I'm also looking forward to it in ways, but again, it's going to be like a thing. It's going to be like a total different thing, because like now when I'm gone, or 2 years from now when I'm gone, like there's going to be nobody around except, her and the dog. And like, so like how do we figure that out? How do we make that work? As far as like those sort of challenges and issues, yeah, it's just kind of like, okay, next, we'll try to plan ahead as best we can, and then respond as best we can to it. But we'll see. Maybe we'll get a van and drive around and meet the band here and there. Who knows?
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So I guess, what do you have planned to promote this solo album the rest of the year? Do you have any more shows planned, and do you anticipate doing more solo albums in the future?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's taken me a little bit by surprise, just like how much I've enjoyed doing the live shows with the band. There's like with my solo act band, just because like, again, like you can't like look to your right or you look to your left and have someone else like sing a song. And I can, but the show it's Graham Sharp, so most of it falls on me, including like the booking and figuring out how we're gonna like get everybody here in this time and like yada yada yada. And that's like I already have a band that like I do like the bulk of the creative work for. So there's like whatever. There's not a ton of time for it, but I found that I love it. I found that I really like having this other outlet. So right now I got one more show coming up. Yeah, in Greensboro. This is June 2nd. We're talking the show's June 10th, I think, in Greensboro. But I'm going to work on booking a lot more because, the band is really cool and they're really into it. Some of the really the best pickers from Western North Carolina, and it's just fun to get up there and do it. And I find that it really translates, like helps me when I come back to the Rangers, like helps me bring a little bit more to the band that way, and just every little bit sort of informs each other, as far as the music goes.
Awesome. So where do you think you are today as an artist and a band member and a solo artist, and where do you want to be at this stage in your career? Do you still have aspirations to learn, to grow, to develop?
Yeah, shit, I'm lucky. I'm just lucky that I still love it. My wife will tell you, I get up in the morning and just like want to go in the back room and play music, That's like that's what I love to do, and I've been doing it for like 25 years and still love it. Just love it to death. And like always have, dreams that I'm gonna, learn how to play this and learn how to play like that. And, things just keep working towards out there, and then I get excited. The other day I pulled out a notepad and started going through like my little messages and notes on my phone. And I was like, oh my gosh, look at all these other songs that like I've started and they're like almost done, or maybe they're done and I've forgotten about it. It was this big long list. I was like, oh man, I gotta work on these songs, So yeah, just still love it. As far as aspirations go, whatever, the Rangers have gone about as far as you can go. So just to see the band continuing to sort of grow and get better and play great shows, I can't ask much more than that. I think this record that we're just finishing making now is going to be a special one. You always think that, but I think this is going to be a special one.
Very good.
I won a Grammy. Googs has won a Grammy, the mandolin player, and Nikki the fiddler's won a Grammy. But other than that, nobody in the band's won a Grammy. So I want to win one for those guys. Get those guys a trophy. Get those guys one of those little gold trophies.
Well, that's great. All right, so last question I ask this of everybody. The theme of this show is curiosity, positivity, all of those good things. And this isn't really a music question, just kind of a life question. I guess, again, similar to what I just asked you, but more broadly, at this stage in your life, as a father, husband, and musician, what are you most curious about?
I guess I'm curious about, honestly, like we were talking about empty nesting. I'm just curious what the next chapter looks like, and obviously, like, it's going to happen, one way, whether I like it or not. But it's also strange to be in a position at this point in your life to be like, you can be very intentional about something, and I don't think you're presented with that opportunity. I don't know. Different people to different degrees, but as someone who's sort of lived by these commitments of family and band and stuff like that, I don't think you don't often get those opportunities to say, hey, I can sort of redraw my landscape a little bit here, and what's it going to look like. So, I don't know. I don't see drastic changes. Like, we look at, like, whatever, you talk to like a financial planner or something like that, and they're like, you're going to retire this year, and then, whatever. And I'm like, looking at it, I'm like, I don't want to retire. Like, what does that even mean? Like, no, that's not going to happen. I'll slow down a little bit, I'm sure, at some point. But, right now, shit, why would I stop doing what we're doing?
No, I don't see you retiring anytime soon. Sure.
Yeah. I am a little bit curious about how to get this set of brakes on my mountain bike that I've been wrestling all day. I've been working on replacing my brakes, so I'm curious about that. So yeah, little things like bike maintenance. I think there's a lot of room to grow.
that add up. So, well, I'll let you get to that actually. But Graham, it's an honor to talk to you. Thanks so much for sharing everything, and I hope to see you in Atlanta, whether solo or with the Rangers at some point. But really appreciate you.
Great. Yeah. Wonderful talking to you. I appreciate you spending the time here. And yeah, I love, getting the chance to sort of think through this stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I don't, until you put it into words, you don't think about it much. So thanks.